Alright, so this week we are focusing on Chapter 11, which is about public presentations. So my first quote from Chapter 11 is, "Even though you will deliver your introduction first, you usually plan your introduction last." I believe this is what the author is trying to say, is that it's a lot easier to write a strong introduction after you have established the content for what you're going to present. Whenever I write a paper, I try to get an outline for what I'm going to talk about as my first step, and then I write the body paragraphs for my paper and focus on the main content, and after that, I write my introduction. This helps me to make sure that have all the ideas developed, and that I can include each of those ideas in my introduction in order to preview what's going to be in the paper. A lot of times, if I try and write my introduction first, I end up having to rewrite it because as I'm writing the main part of the paper, I discover something else that I should include or something that's not really relevant and end up taking it out or adding it. So it's really helpful to write your introduction after you've figured out what you're going to talk about and what you're presenting on. That way you can make the strongest introduction. The next quote that I'm going to talk about is, "Long after you finish speaking, your audience may mentally hear the echo of your final words. An effective conclusion serves 4 functions. It summarizes your speech, reemphasizes the main idea in a memorable way, motivates the audience to respond, and provides closure." I think that the conclusion is almost as important, if not more important, than the introduction. Basically, your introduction serves to get your audience to the conclusion, and the conclusion is your opportunity to go out with a bang. When you have a strong conclusion, you leave your audience with something to remember. You want people to remember what you were talking about and the point of your paper, so that's what the goal of a conclusion is. You want to summarize your main ideas in a memorable way. Your audience probably isn't going to remember most of what you said, but if you can phrase your conclusion in such a way that it's memorable, then your audience is going to remember that. They're going to remember the point of your speech, and they're going to be inspired by that, if that's your intent. Most people, if they're presenting something, want to leave a lasting impression, so the conclusion is where they do that. Sometimes it's just a summary of the main points of a speech. I think a lot of times for a business presentation, that's the purpose it serves, but a lot of times you have a central idea or point that you're trying to make, and so you can re-emphasize that with your conclusion. Sometimes you want your audience to take an action and respond, and so you can inspire them to do that using your conclusion. And it also provides closure. It tells your audience this is the end of the presentation, and leaves them without a feeling of being left with a cliffhanger or not knowing what you were actually getting at. So I think conclusions are very important, and that the author is definitely correct in saying that they are important. And that's all for this week. See you next week with Chapter 12.